My name's Toby Young. I'll be covering Boris Johnson's bid to become the next Mayor of London for The Spectator, and I'll also be making a video diary of Boris's campaign for the Spectator website.
It's July 16th, the day on which Boris formally announced he'd be running for mayor. I began by having breakfast with Peter York, co-author of the official Sloane Ranger handbook. I was curious to know how much of a handicap he thought Boris's poshness would be in the campaign.
I think it's completely hopeless to try and distance Tories from Toffs, and in fact I think it's quite irrelevant. I think that Toffs are now a sort of novelty. Toffs, as opposed to ordinary, ruthless, rich people, I think are a kind of novelty, and I think Toffs, in a sense, if you think that at the time that the Tories were most associated with fantastic social divisiveness, they were entirely manned by grammar school people from the provinces. I think that's not the association people now know. There are very few people now who feel themselves to be oppressed by Toffs.
Next stop were the offices of The Spectator, where I was meeting Matthew Dancona, the current editor, and Nicholas Bowles, the openly gay Conservative who had hoped to run for mayor himself, but who recently announced he wouldn't be standing for health reasons. Boris has inherited Nick's entire campaign team.
Do we need to cuddle up closer to get into your frame?
No,
I'm sure Matt would be delighted.
That works.
I have no problem with that.
So, Nick, what do you think about Boris For Mayor? Do you think he actually stands a chance?
Oh, absolutely. I think, as you know, I was thinking of running for mayor, and I think I stood a chance, but I think Boris has a much, much better chance than I ever did, and than any other Conservative has. And people overestimate how popular Ken Livingstone is. He's sort of written himself into the script. He's part of the furniture of everybody's lives in London. And so therefore they can't really imagine life without him. But he's never won more than 37% of the first preference vote. Now that's not that great. Boris can certainly do it.
Nick reckons Boris is a new Conservative, but isn't there a danger, Matthew, that he'll simply consolidate the Conservative Party's old image as being full of old Etonian, Oxford-educated classicists who speak in posh voices, and actually isn't that what Cameron's trying to desperately kind of distance the party
Well, he
from?
doesn't seem to encourage that impression. I mean, it's interesting about Boris is that the people that he appeals to most are precisely the people that the Conservative Party is trying to reach, which are young people. If you look at Facebook at the moment, there's a hugely popular Boris For Mayor application there. And my feeling is that he for whatever reason, and there's a kind of extraordinary chemistry with Boris, he does seem to stretch a hand out to people who are just not. It's not only not normal Tory voters; they're not really interested in politics at all. And that's the huge asset he has as a prospective candidate, is that he's someone who could actually mobilise voters who might not have voted in the first place.
As far as you know, is this Boris's idea, or is this something that he's been sort of asked to do by the party?
Oh, totally Boris's idea.
And that's not just the party line, it is in fact
No, it is
Boris's
in fact
idea.
true.
So this is something that's been sprung on the
It's been
leadership.
sprung on the leadership, and I think the leadership are both excited and terrified. Probably like Boris.
That's a big issue, isn't it, Matthew? How much control do you think the leadership will want to have over this campaign?
Well, I hope they have almost none at all, to be honest, other than sticking the kite mark of the Tory party on whoever is chosen in the primaries to be the mayoral candidate, and then let them get on with it. I mean, we hear a lot of talk nowadays about localism and the new politics and devolution. Well, here is a very good opportunity for the Conservative Party to put its money where its mouth is and say, this is a local campaign, this is a London campaign. If Boris becomes the candidate, let Boris be Boris. If it will be a disaster if the Central Party tries to impose any form of discipline upon Boris, first of all because he just won't have it, and secondly because the whole point of Boris is that he is an individual. He is a candidate who is himself, and it would be absolutely terrible if there was some sort of tension between the centre and the individual. I actually think there won't be, because I suspect the party will have the sense to see this is a great opportunity for the Conservative Party generally to up its profile and potentially to have a very powerful person sitting in City Hall.
But isn't that just the point, Nick? I mean, this will kind of be seen as a dress rehearsal for the general election, with many of the same oppositions being played out in microcosm. And won't that mean that the Steve Hiltons and so forth in central office will want to kind of mastermind the whole thing? They won't just allow it to unfold on its own terms.
No, I don't think so, because I think that there are different ways of coordinating themes without controlling. The fact is that Boris actually is a moderniser. Boris was an early supporter of David Cameron. He's ridden bikes, frankly, much longer than most Tories have. He's the genuine article. He shares those priorities and those values. He'll go and put them into practice in a London campaign in his own way. That's what matters. What matters is that it isn't an old Tory campaign. It isn't a core vote, hang 'em and flog 'em campaign. Now, there's no way on God's earth that Boris is going to run that kind of campaign, so they can be relaxed about it, and I think they will be.
The big moment had arrived. It was off to London Bridge for a photo call that Boris's new campaign team had arranged in front of City Hall. The circus was about to roll into town.
We know one or two other ones that have thrown their hat into the ring, but there are 50, we're told, in total now. So not all of them are well known.
As his biographer, you're very well qualified to speak to the character issue. I mean, up until now, Boris has lacked focus, shall we say, when it comes to taking on big things like this. He's a bit shambolic, a bit chaotic, a bit disorganised. Is he going to have the self-discipline to really fight and win a campaign of this magnitude? This isn't Henley, this is London.
Boris wants to have his cake and eat it. It's quite true. He's very bad at answering either-or questions. His answer to that sort of question is both, invariably. But I think this is a big enough thing to engage his interests, his pride. It's a real chance for him to make a comeback and become... I mean, of course, as far as the public is concerned, he is one of the only 2 or 3 living Conservatives, Thatcher and Cameron being the others, who anyone's heard of. But politically at Westminster, he's stymied. Cameron's taken the old Etonian slot. There's only one going at the top, and so this is an absolutely brilliant opportunity for Boris to do a kind of flanking manoeuvre and play to his strengths, which is communicating directly with the general public.
Thank you, well done.
Very nice fight.
Well,
there's no shortage of journalists here, are there? I mean,
Boris Johnson, Boris Mania. Boris
watch out.
Come on, this is
I'm worried about
So there you have it, a fairly shambolic start to the Boris For Mayor campaign. But having said that, a majority of his friends and colleagues are convinced that he'll prove a pretty formidable candidate. One of the people I spoke to in the course of researching my piece about Boris for this week's Spectator was the famous American pollster Frank Luntz, who, like me, was a contemporary of Boris's at Oxford over 20 years ago. And I think Frank put his finger on the biggest question mark surrounding Boris's candidacy. I quote, "The only challenge I see is in terms of focus. It's the same thing in America. Does Fred Thompson have the fire in his belly to campaign? And that's the only question I would ask of Boris. Does he have the fire in his belly?" Well, over the coming weeks and months, we'll find out. This is Toby Young reporting for The Spectator on day 1 of the Boris For Mayor campaign.